yeah, I mean, whenever there's a hate crime or whenever we travel, or even those like shocking cases of someone like yelling something at you as they walk by or drive by, it's like those things that we know like we should be able to live without. And I was like, oh no, I like kept repeatedly explaining. I was like, no, it's like those twisty pins. You've like definitely seen them on TV. They like, keep your bun in. They're like, no, like we have to see them. And I remember the woman getting like more and more aggressive, and eventually my mom, kind of came up to me. She was like, look, we're gonna miss our flight. We have to go. And so she and I, they let my mom come back with me, but basically went into this back room that was like very dirty, like didn't even have a light. They closed the door, asked me to take my dastaar off. So I started taking it off, and I remember there like wasn't even a clean surface to put it on. The counter looked like it hadn't been cleaned in like years. So I like remember trying to give it to my mom because I didn't want it to touch the floor, like touch the dirty counter, and they freaked out and they're like, no, she can't touch it. We have to touch it first. And I remember them like very aggressively searching through the fabric, like trying to find something. And the star fabric is literally like a very fine type of cotton. It can be ripped like with a fingernail very easily. Like I often rip mine when I'm tying it because my fingernails are too long. And afterwards we like had a couple minutes until our flight was taking off, so I had to quickly retie my dastaar in that back room. Didn't have a mirror, so I just like quickly did it, and we like ran to my flight. But I just remember that being like a really negative start to what turned out to be a great weekend because my cousin was getting married. So I lived in southeastern Wisconsin from the age of 3 to almost, I think, 14. For some reason, I never felt uncomfortable. I definitely knew that I was different, but I felt accepted for that. So leaving there was obviously really hard. Um, I remember my brother and I, like, the last couple of days running around our house threatening to find super glue so we could glue our butts to the floor of our house so our parents couldn't make us leave. I've always, and I still do, hold Wisconsin in like a really dear place in my heart. I think that's also what made August 5th, 2012 so much more emotional than it already was. On that day, a man with neo-Nazi beliefs, for honestly probably no other reason besides he had a fear towards people who looked different, entered the Oak Creek Gurdwara, so the Sikh house of worship in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and started shooting. And 6 members of the congregation were shot and killed, one of which was one of my dad's closest friends. And his sons were like brothers to me. His nephew is one of my closest friends growing up. I remember everything about that day. I remember everything about finding out about how each of my family members reacted, um, everything that happened to me in the weeks and days following. I remember going back for the funerals, sort of finding out more details from the community members about exactly what happened and being even more horrified than when I had heard it the first time. Most of all, I think um, I remember a sense of guilt now that for some reason it was my fault, or if I had been there or still lived in Wisconsin, I could have done something about it, which is ridiculous, especially since I was 18. And in the week following, I remember hearing a lot from my dad and my brother, but even from Sikh males around the country who were not remotely connected or even geographically close to Wisconsin, about how strangers had heard about the shooting on the news and were approaching them and offering their condolences. And I remember the day after the shooting, the several days after, I was working a research job here in Ann Arbor that summer. And I remember no one said anything to me. I had this like fairly, honestly simple light bulb moment, but there was no clear visible way to identify me as a Sikh. And that moment was when I fully decided to wear a dastaar or a Sikh turban. Always and still find it really hard to identify myself as an Indian American. I think mostly because in recent history and in long history past, my people, both Sikhs and Punjabis, have never been treated kindly by, I guess, what is now called the Indian government, or even just sort of the rulers of South Asia in general. And so it's not really a place of fond memories for my family, and thus, as a result, for me, it's sort of a place that is stricken with, I guess, like, quite frankly, the blood of my ancestors. Whenever I have to tell someone my ethnicity, I always describe it as I'm Punjabi, which is means that my ancestry or my ethnicity is from the state of Punjab, a state on in the northwest of India, but also in the northeast of Pakistan, because during the partition it was split right down the middle. And I think that honestly is pretty symbolic of my own feeling towards India and America, and how I feel about my identity in general, is that it always kind of feels like I'm torn right down the middle, and there's really no place for me to land. Although there are a lot of negative histories to the area, that is also like the birthplace of our religion. That's where our parents grew up. And so it's this homeland that I very strangely feel almost homesick for, even though I have no recollection of it. Um, and sometimes I wonder if it's in reaction to not feeling that I fully belong here, but I also know from stories of other people that I wouldn't fully belong there either. So I feel like the US, although certainly a long way to go here, almost provides more promise.
Quella fiamma che m'accende, piace tanto all'alma mia, piace tanto all'alma mia, che giammai si estinguerà.